So living things can adapt to their environment. They can also, I heard somebody say, grow and develop.
So this is what living things can do, or this is what viruses?
This is what living things can do. We're going to go through and talk about whether viruses fit into those.
Reproduction.
Okay, reproduction. What else?
Metabolism.
Metabolism? Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
New stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Morgan. Come on.
So-
Better resources.
Casey, do you have another one on there?
Homeostasis.
Homeostasis?
Yeah, whatever that word is. Good job. What?
What is homeostasis? All right, let's focus here. What does homeostasis mean?
Is it something with bodies? There's like a thermostat.
Wow. Changing to adapt.
Well, we talked about it in terms of temperature as far as humans, just as an example. But the overall process of homeostasis is basically keeping in an internal environment the same.
Wow. So like keeping our temperature at like 98.6.
Right, that is an example of homeostasis, but we also maintain a constant pH in most cases, keeping us free of viruses and things like that. Those would be examples of human homeostasis. So things that are alive are able to do homeostasis, basically keep a stable environment, internal environment. Oops. Okay. Any other characteristics of living things?
Ordered, non-random structures.
Okay, they have an ordered, non-random structure.
Yeah, over generations.
And as Casey said, they can adapt over generations, which of course we know now as evolution. So they can evolve. So, what we need to do is look at these and go, how do viruses fit into each of these categories? Would we consider them to be alive? So, first of all, viruses adapt to their environment. Yes. Yeah, virus floating along, it bumps into a cell. It's able, depending on the type of cell, it's able to recognize that as a cell that it can infect or not, chemically, and then either attach or not. So that's adapting to its environment. It's going to behave differently depending on what type of cell it's going to come into contact. So absolutely, it can adapt to its environment. Okay. Let's look at reproduce and grow and develop together, because a lot of times those things do kind of go together when we talk about organisms. As far as reproduction goes, well, kind of. Viruses definitely reproduce, but they don't do so without help from a host cell. So as far as reproduction goes, kind of, but they need a host cell to do the work. What viruses do is they actually are able to take over a host cell and make the host cell put together more viruses. So that's kind of in a gray area. It's not like a straightforward, oh yes, two viruses come together and you get more viruses. The only way that the virus can actually make more of itself is by ransacking a cell and having the cell put together more viruses. And the same thing is true as far as grow and develop goes. Those two things go together. The development of them, the growth of them, is going to be the host cell putting them together. So they don't really do it on their own. They have to have some other organism do it for them. Okay, metabolism, yes, they are able to use energy sources. They're able to use ATP to do certain things, especially when they're attacking a host cell. Attacking?
Not very nice. You say attacking. Oh,
Attacking. Homeostasis? Not really. They're not really able to repair themselves if they get damaged. Something gets inside them, they're not really able to get it out. I mean, they're just kind of, well, they're just kind of more like inert machinery. Ordered structure, absolutely. As we will see today, there's 4 main types of viruses. You can see them, or recognize those types based on their structures. They absolutely have an ordered structure.
you watch a video on?
And they can evolve.
They absolutely can evolve. Viruses will change over time, which is why getting a flu shot does not necessarily mean you will not get the flu. Getting a flu shot will protect you from those specific strands, those specific families of viruses that you got, but because viruses in the wild mutate and change and evolve, you could get infected with something that is different enough that your body is not ready for it, and you can still get sick.
But if it's like pretty much the same, then you probably won't get sick. It's just almost
Right. I'm not saying don't get a flu shot. It definitely will protect you. It's not a surefire thing because of evolution. Okay? Now, because of the way this list looks, and we did not answer a definitive yes for every one of those things, most scientists would say, well, viruses aren't alive. They're interesting things, but they're kind of like machines. We do not consider them to be alive. Some people, though, say, well, these first 6 things, yeah, maybe, but the 7th one is the important one. And so some people would say, well, if they can evolve, then we should say that they're living organisms. Yes, they are fundamentally different than others because of those different things on there. They're different than the things that we call eukaryotes and prokaryotes. But they maybe should have their own class. Their own domain. Because they can evolve. I tend to fall towards that view. I think we should consider viruses to be living things. But when it really comes down to it, it's just kind of a label. Are they living? Are they not? Well, it doesn't really matter. We can still study them, look how they infect cells, figure out ways to protect ourselves from them. So it's a little bit of a moot point whether we call them living organisms or not. But because you see that, I want to talk about it. Some people will consider them to be living, some people will not. Hey, which way you guys leaning? They should be considered living?
I think they should be considered living. They kill viruses.
We do talk about killing viruses. There are ways to deactivate them and destroy them, and make them so they can't infect. That's a good point.
Because there's really just no one downside. Like, there's only
It's true. A strict, well, I don't know what you would call them actually. A person that would follow this strictly would say, well, if you answer no for any of those, then we should.
Well, it's not technically a no.
well,
Yeah, I mean, I put not really. That's a no. I guess I was hedging a little there.
You're being a little biased.
Could be. Okay, so that's that. Now, viruses are host cell specific. There are thousands of viruses that will not do anything to you. We talked about bacteriophages. What are those, in fact?
bacteria.
Bacteria is right in the name. There's also lots of viruses that infect plants. Plant cells are, very different than your cells. But there's all sorts of things, diseases that say your cat can get, you're not going to get. We are a little bit more careful about those sorts of things because our cells are more similar to a cat than, say, to a plant. And there is maybe a chance that a mutation could cause them to be able to infect us. Same thing about, you guys heard about bird flu?
No.
Much longer ago than it seems like to me that was a thing, but we can't really get bird flu, but people were still worried about it because they were worried that it was so easily transferred between birds and was easily spread that if there was some sort of mutation that caused it so that we would get infected, it could cause problems. Okay. So we call viruses that can cause a disease pathogens. A pathogen for a plant would not necessarily be a pathogen for us. In fact, I don't know really of any viruses that can infect both plants and animals. The cells are just way too different from each other. Okay, so tobacco mosaic virus. For humans, we would not count that as a pathogen. Not going to do anything to us. We can squirt ourselves full of these viruses, but as we float around in your body, it'd be a little weird. It's not going to infect you. But Ebola, definitely a pathogen for us. But so is influenza. You guys do know that influenza is the flu, right?
Yeah.
Right.
What?
Apparently that's not common knowledge. What? My wife was sick last week and she told a bunch of people, oh, I got a flu shot though, and they were like, well, maybe it's influenza. It's the same thing. So, I just want to make sure we cleared that up. Influenza, flu, same thing.
Did you give him a weird look?
So did your mom, or did your wife know that they were the same thing, and she just like, it was like,
I mean, so many people did it, she started to doubt herself, and she was like, those are the same, right? Yes. Yes.
Isn't there like a type A and a type B though?
Oh, there's so many types of influenza. There's
So when you puke, is that
What's that?
when you like puke, is that silver flu?
It could be.
Influenza or?
Yeah, could be. I mean, could be food poisoning. I mean, there's different things that can cause you to feel like that. Generally, because it's so ubiquitous, we think, well, that's probably the flu. Okay, here's our different virus structures. Now, viruses are, whether we call them alive or not, they're very much more simple compared to any type of cell, even a bacterial cell. There's no cellular membrane, there's no cytoplasm. In most viruses, what you're going to find is you're going to find some sort of genetic material, either DNA or RNA, and then you're going to find some proteins, and you're going to find, well, depending on the type, you're going to find a structure that kind of encapsulates them. So probably the most simple type, or one of the most simple type, is called a helical. In a helical virus, we have a strand of RNA that is in a helix. It just kind of spirals up almost like a slinky. And then around the outside, you have a capsid that protects it. That's really all there is to it. Basically a DNA with a suit of armor.
so would you say that that's the most simple?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would definitely say so. The next one, the polyhedral, is very much the same. It's just got a little bit different shape to it. So in a polyhedral, it has a DNA inside of it, and then it's got this capsomere on the outside to kind of protect it, this capsid. So, this is a polyhedral.
So we're gonna have to know the names of all of these.
Yes, these four you will need to know the names of. Okay? Now this shows an example. There are some polyhedral that don't have any glycoproteins. But on the outside of some viruses, you will find something called a glycoprotein. This is basically kind of a ID checker.
What does it have to check?
It's going to check the ID of a cell that it bumps up to. So that glycoprotein is specifically made so that it will fit a structure on the outside of a host cell. That makes it, because these things don't have brains or anything, but they need to know, hey, I can actually infect this cell. So this glycoprotein has a specific shape to it, and as it's bumping into stuff inside an organism, if it bumps into the right thing, it's going to fit into the right, I mean, it's almost like a key. It's bumping around looking for a lock. If it fits into the lock, then it opens it up, and it can infect the cell.
Whoa.
I feel like that's kind of complicated. It's not really. Or is it?
It's as simple as you can get as far as cell recognition goes. I mean, viruses that don't have that, basically, they waste a lot of themselves because they try to infect things that they can't actually open up and get into. Okay. This is an enveloped virus. And the thing you have to be careful about here is inside we have these RNA strands that are covered in a capsid. So here, as the capsid was on the outside, right? Oops. Because they're pretty simple. This one is more complex because it's got this envelope that surrounds the things, then they still have a capsid. So this is almost like two suits of armor on. But here, each of the RNA strands in there is going to have kind of its own capsid to protect it, and then surrounding those is this envelope, and on the outside of the envelope you might find glycoproteins. And here's some examples of these different things. So tobacco mosaic virus is a helical. Adenovirus is going to be a polyhedral. Flu would be an enveloped. And then the last type we've already kind of seen before, a bacteriophage. Some people will just call them phages. The bacteriophage is a little bit more complex. They've still got this capsid head, and there's genetic material, DNA inside. But they've got this tail section that has kind of these little legs on it that help attach to the host cell. And that helps them out because bacteria, which is what the phage is going to infect, of course, have a cell wall, being prokaryotes. So they have helps attach to the cell wall and find a way into the cell for the Okay. So, just to give you an idea, this would be a human red blood cell. So imagine this thing, it's probably about the size of this hula hoop. Actually, a little bit bigger. Okay, here would be an E. coli bacterium. These are the sizes of viruses. Viruses are really, really, really small. Much smaller than a cell. So the smallest cell inside your body is still going to dwarf a virus by size. Here's another kind of look at that. So here would be a red blood cell next to E. coli. If we blow that up so the E. coli fits it, then we can sort of start to see some of the structures of the different viruses.
Did we kind of do like a computer, like almost like a YouTube video where we like zoomed out or something?
Smallpox.
Yeah, you might remember that from astronomy too.
Oh,
Okay. So here's polio, really small. Smallpox is a little bit bigger, but all of these viruses are going to be small compared to cells. Tiny. Yeah, let's skip over that. All right. The life cycle of a virus is also pretty simple. This would be a basic bacteriophage life cycle. It's going to recognize a host cell and attach to it. And basically that outer part, the thing that kind of gives it its shape, all that is a thing for carrying around the DNA so the DNA can get from host cell to host cell. Once it attaches, it basically squirts its DNA into the cell. The cell, the ribosomes don't know any better. I mean, actually, I guess I should say ribosomes because it takes a step to get there. But basically, the machinery doesn't know any better. It's going to read the DNA of that the bacteriophage is put in there and follow out the instructions to make proteins. The proteins that are made from that DNA are going to break down inner parts of the cell, and they're going to make new bacteriophages and put them together. Once the cell is full of these bacteriophages, then they're all going to break out. The cell is going to lyse, which means it breaks apart. And now we have new bacteriophages that can find another host cell to infect.
thanks.
So viruses literally hijack the systems that make proteins inside of the cell, use those to put together things that actually destroy the cell and to make new viruses to be released.
And then the viruses just affect other cells in your body if they don't go like.
They can. That's how we get colds transferred from one person to another. Those viruses can definitely be passed on into another person and infect their cells instead of yours.
Well, they have to go to your
That's true. That's why cough into your armpit. Or, I mean, your cough into your elbow. That's what I
Works pretty good. Yeah, it keeps it down there. Sorry. Had to cough.
Oh, sorry, not phase. This is called the lytic cycle. Okay, now we're kind of running out of time, so we'll probably have to talk about the lysogenic cycle tomorrow. That'll be the next one. It's a little bit more complicated. But the simplest, bacteria infects cell, makes more, break out, do it all over again. We call that the lytic cycle. Okay. Now, this explains why usually when you get something, you don't feel symptoms for a while. Because one cell gets infected, that's not going to do that much. But we can have hundreds, even thousands of new bacteria that are made by a single cell. So you can go from one cell infected to hundreds, to thousands, to millions, and then you start feeling the effects when more and more cells get infected. Everybody does have defenses against this. There are certain cells inside your body, especially white blood cells, that are made to go around, hunt these things down, and destroy them. And it doesn't take much to destroy them. They're not alive. They can't do anything about it. Right? So basically, eat them up, chew them up, and spit them out, your white blood cells. Okay? But if your body doesn't know they're there, sometimes these things can get kind of a head start and affect enough cells before your body starts taking over and destroying them, then you start feeling sick. So that's why sometimes it's good for certain viruses to get a vaccine. Because a vaccine, and we'll talk about how it works a little bit later, a vaccine basically gives your body a preview. Hey, watch out for these things. They could infect you. So it's already got machinery made to deal with them.
Are they gonna making people buy their
They are working on making an Ebola vaccine. The biggest problem is Ebola. If you take all the people who have ever died ever of Ebola, it's still like 1% of the people that will die this year from the flu. So we hear about it because it transfers so quickly, and it has a fairly high kill percentage, but it's still not, I don't know. We still don't dump that much money into it because overall it really doesn't affect them. It's pretty easy to actually stop just by, once we know about an outbreak, just by having. Okay. That's where we'll stop for today. Tomorrow we'll talk about the lysogenic cycle.